of Devon and Cornwall into Wales through the Midlands as well. So sunny spells, but also a peppering of showers. If you do catch one, could be heavy and thundery. Some of the warmest spots, Hull for instance, up to about 19 degrees, but we're typically looking at the mid to high teens. For Northern Ireland and Northern and Western Scotland, a fair amount of dry weather on the cards. Some sunshine, a bit more cloud working into the north here. But for central and southeast Scotland, you're going to keep the cloud. The rain will be easing out through the day. And into the evening hours, then most of us lose the showery rain. It'll slowly clear away from the southeast, but may just linger for the likes of Kent, for instance, to start your Tuesday morning. And there'll be some low clouds, some mist and some fog patches, especially for Scotland, where we've got that wet ground. Eastern England, for instance, as well, a few fog patches towards the southwest. But it should brighten up through the day tomorrow, so some sunny spells for many of us. Still some showers bubbling up through the day, but they won't be as heavy or as frequent as the showers we've got out there today. Top temperatures probably a degree or so warmer, 19, 20 degrees for some of us. But if you are stuck under the cloud across parts of Scotland, for instance, about 13 for Aberdeen. Now into Wednesday, high pressure is building in, so it's squeezing away most of the showers. A lot of dry weather for England and Wales. Can't rule out the odd showery spell, but for most places, a much drier spell of weather. A bit more cloud working in from the northwest ahead of this area of rain. But top temperatures quite widely around 19 or 20 degrees. And then high pressure stays with us towards the end of the week. It's just sitting towards the south. So we'll start to see a few weather fronts toppling around the northern end of that high pressure. At times that'll bring a little bit of showery rain to parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland too. But for most of us, things are looking much drier through the week ahead, and it'll be warming up. We could see those temperatures in the mid 20s by next weekend. Bye-bye.
Be prepared this bank holiday, whatever the weather. Check on the BBC Weather app.
The climate of southern Europe is changing. It's becoming more and more like North Africa.
Thousands of people continue to stream across Sudan and South Sudan.
There's riot police everywhere around. This is not the face of France that Emmanuel Macron wants you to see.
We're having to stay under the trees here because Russian drones are constantly patrolling.
This was the town of Bethania. These were people's homes, but look at it now.
This is the moment they've been waiting for. The pride, the excitement, and the affection is palpable.
This is as close as we can get to Gaza itself, about 5 kilometres in that direction. There is a lot of military activity, jets overhead.
17 days they have spent inside that tunnel. Now they are finally out.
What does it take to become a top opera star like tenor Jonas Kaufmann, Welsh bass baritone Sabryn Terfel, and Greek-American soprano Maria Callas? I'm on a mission to find out how opera is trying to attract new audiences and reinvent itself.
I think music has the power to change the world.
Take me to the opera. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Israel's military begins what it's calling a limited and temporary evacuation of civilians from Rafah in southern Gaza. This is the scene live in Al-Mawasi in Gaza, where some of the displaced have been told to move to. Chinese President Xi Jinping arrives in France on the first leg of his European tour, his first visit to the continent in 5 years. John Swinney is expected to be confirmed as the new leader of the Scottish National Party shortly after a potential challenger pulls out of the race. And the wait is nearly over for the world's largest live music contest. Eurovision Week kicks off in style in Sweden. Hello, I'm Lauren Taylor. Israel's military has begun ordering Palestinian civilians to leave parts of eastern Rafah ahead of a planned operation in the southern Gaza city. This video from the Israeli Defense Forces urges people to move to what they call a humanitarian zone in the Al-Mawasi and Khan Yunis areas. The IDF are calling it a limited operation, affecting about 100,000 people. Well, these are the latest pictures that have come into us from Rafah. And you can see a leaflet that the IDF have been handing over to residents. Some have already started leaving Rafah. And these are live pictures coming into us from Al-Mawasi, where some people have been told to go. Some black smoke has been seen on the horizon. Western and Arab leaders are repeatedly warned against a major ground operation in Rafah because of the large numbers of Palestinians sheltering there. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insists the move is necessary. Our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell has the latest.
Already we're seeing people fleeing from this area in the east of Rafah. They're getting into their cars with their belongings, into donkey carts as well, some of them heading to the west, others maybe heeding the Israeli order to go to these two tent cities, Al-Mawasi and Khan Yunis. And the Israeli military is stressing that what is planned here is a limited offensive, that it will happen in a gradual way. Now, Hamas has come out already, though, saying that this is a dangerous escalation that will have consequences. We had understood that a Hamas delegation had left Cairo, where it had been involved in the negotiations with Egyptian mediators on a new ceasefire and hostage release deal, that they were heading to Doha to meet Hamas leaders. Although we had the Israeli Defense Minister coming out in a statement saying he had spoken to the US Defense Secretary and that this military action in Rafah was needed because he said that Hamas was refusing to accept the latest framework for a new deal. So we're having warnings already from the UN that this could have serious consequences. They're very worried about the fact that the Kerem Shalom crossing into southern Gaza, a key crossing point for aid, has now been closed. This happened after Hamas fired rockets, apparently from inside Rafah, towards what they said was an Israeli military base. They actually killed 3 Israeli soldiers and wounded about a dozen others close to that crossing point. And Israel launched retaliatory action last night for those soldiers being killed. So things do seem to be, again, at a very tense moment. And this is really an area where the international community has been so worried because you have more than 1 million displaced Palestinians crammed up next to the Egyptian border, and they've worried that a wider scale ground offensive by Israel, if that was to go ahead, as Israel has threatened, saying it's needed for a total victory over Hamas, then that could lead to high numbers of civilians being killed.
Hada Al-Kurd is staying in South Gaza in a shelter run by UNRWA, the UN relief agency still operating in Gaza. She says she doesn't know where she'll go.
I'm so confused, just to be honest. I have no place to go. This was the last place I know. And actually, if I want to come back to Khan Yunis, there is no place. It's all destroyed. To areas of Al-Mawasi, they are crowded, and I cannot anymore live inside tent. It's so hot, and my health, it's not allowed for me to be in such situation. Regarding Deir al-Balah and Al-Nusayrat, still there is a lot of airstrikes there. I've been there, and it's very dangerous areas.
James Elder, who's a spokesperson for the United Nations Children's Fund, also known as UNICEF, told me what he thinks the impact will be of the evacuation.
Absolutely devastating. You have families in Rafah, their coping capacity has been smashed. This is 6 months of enduring this war, moving many times, probably having lost a home already. Children are malnourished. They've already been living in conditions with, one shower for 3,500 people. They're being told to move, quote unquote, to a humanitarian zone. That's a unilaterally declared humanitarian zone. That's not a humanitarian zone where humanitarians have been able to provide the services they need to. So I've been talking to colleagues and friends in Rafah this morning, and they're terrified. I was speaking, Lauren, to a young woman. She's like, I know this has been coming. I just don't know what to pack. They'll go to an area in the middle zone, Lauren, called Deribala, where there is literally raw sewage in the streets, or maybe to Al Mawasi, which is a beach. Same story applies. Nowhere is safe, but as unbearable as this is, it's happening and it's going to be horrific.
And is it your understanding that there are only specific areas that people have been allowed to move to, or can they choose?
No, there are specific areas without a doubt. Partly they will have to choose based on those people who have the means to leave. A lot of people have injured children with them. Hospitals, as I've seen, hospitals cannot cope with the number of injuries. There's a lot of children who have had amputations who are back living in tents. Those families will find it hard to move. But geographically, logistically, no, you still can't. A lot of families will not be able to move to the north if they'd hoped to. Khan Yunis is impossible. That's another city bordering Rafah. That is rubble, not a little bit, but street after street of rubble. So they'll be pushed into this area called Mawasi, Lauren, which is a beach area. It's sand. It has next to no sanitation or hygiene. It's getting hot right now in Gaza. It's raining today, but it's getting hot. So they'll be in tents side by side, 5 or 6 times the population density of New York City, but all on the ground, not a high rise to be seen, with no hospital care. The last remaining hospital of size is in Rafah, European hospital, so named because it was donated by the people of Europe. It's got 20,000 people hiding there and thousands more in care. They will have to move somewhere without the medical care that they need.
Tell us, you said that the Israeli army had set up these areas without assistance from the humanitarian community. What can you now do in terms of providing help if people are moving? Is there anything you can do?
Yeah, it's a great question. The whole aid operation has been so fragile because of denials and restrictions and insecurity and bombardments. Let's not forget our colleagues from the World Central Kitchen who were killed. A week later, a UNICEF vehicle came under fire. Now, of course, that crossing in Rafah that is the lifeline of aid. If we are going to get close to meeting the needs of people, that crossing will now be closed for I don't know for how long. So, no, we have to be clear. You can't unilaterally declare a safe zone, firstly, because the other side won't be considering it as that, and secondly, because the United Nations needs time to actually try and support 1 million or 2 people. I said this in November. UNICEF and the UN has said this, Lauren, from the very start in November and December. This safe zone narrative is very dangerous because a safe zone legally must also provide water, food, sanitation and protection. These zones don't have that for people. And quite frequently, as the people in Rafah will tell you, safe zones also get bombed.
Well, let's bring you those pictures there coming into us from Al Mawasi, which is the area that Palestinians have been asked to move from by the Israeli military. And this morning, the Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant said in a statement that this military action in Rafah is required due to Hamas's refusals of mediated proposals for a Gaza truce, under which the Palestinian Islamist group would free some hostages. The BBC has contacted the IDF, the Israeli military, for an interview to give us more information about this operation. They haven't at the moment put anyone up to speak to us. So we'll keep you posted on that story as it continues to develop. Now, the French President Emmanuel Macron has welcomed China's president during a rare visit to the Élysée Palace. It's Xi Jinping's first state visit to the region in 5 years. Emmanuel Macron greeted his Chinese counterpart before they both headed inside for talks. Top of the agenda is the war in Ukraine and trade relations with the EU. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is also attending. The discussions come amid growing trade tensions. Our Paris correspondent is Hugh Schofield. He has more on the wider tensions between China, France and the US.
Well, though, in a way, as I was saying, I mean, the Europeans are, in a way, increasingly aligned with the United States on China. I mean, the United States has accused the Europeans for a long time now of being too soft on China, or not waking up to the reality of the new China. And arguably that's exactly what the Europeans are doing. And certainly Macron last week in his speech and in his Economist interview was, quite blatantly concerned about the rise of China and about Europe's naivety and unwillingness to see China, the new China, for what it was. So there is, in a way, the possibility of an American-European alignment here. And I think what President Xi's trying to do is break that, and he's doing it with traditional Chinese diplomatic manners, coming here being very, very fulsome in his praise for France and its historical importance and its grandeur and the role of Charles de Gaulle in recognizing China back in 1964 and all of this. This is the way they talk to the French, flattering France's sense of its own destiny. It talks to Germany in a rather different way. To the Germans, China talks as a purely commercial partner and promises all sorts of commercial deals if it toes the line and for example, blocks the European investigations into dumping practices and so on. So the Chinese interest, quite clearly, but this is the big picture, is to split the Europeans from each other and from Europe, and that's what's going on here.
The former Deputy First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney, is set to become the Scottish National Party's new leader after his only potential challenger withdrew from the contest. The deadline for nominations is in less than an hour's time. Our reporter Ben Phillip has more.
As you can tell, I'm sad that my time as First Minister is ending. But I am so grateful, I'm so blessed for having the opportunity that are afforded to so few to lead my country.
A week is a long time in politics. Last Monday, an emotional Humza Yousaf resigned, leaving the SNP looking for a new leader and Scotland a new First Minister. Focus quickly turned to who would replace him. In the frame, John Swinney and Kate Forbes.
I want to unite the SNP and unite Scotland for independence.
Shortly after Mr Swinney entered the contest, Ms Forbes said she wouldn't stand. Technically, the deadline for nominations is at midday, and as the only current contender and with the clock running down, it was widely expected that John Swinney would become the next SNP party leader and country's 7th First Minister unopposed. That was until a last-minute twist over the weekend.
SNP activist Graham McCormick was hoping to lodge a challenge for the leadership position. It's thought he collected signatures at a pro-independence march in Glasgow at the weekend. But no sooner had the bid launched, it was over. In a statement late last night, Mr McCormick said he'd met the nominations threshold to enter the contest, adding that after a lengthy and fruitful conversation with John Swinney, they had agreed on the challenges which the SNP, Scottish Government and people face. He described it as a fresh start to deliver Scottish independence. He said, "I have therefore concluded that I shall not proceed with my nomination for party leader," throwing his support behind John Swinney. Over the weekend, Mr Swinney insisted he was the right man for the job.
I feel physically and mentally ready to become the leader of the SNP and the First Minister of Scotland. And I will give it absolutely everything I have in me to make sure that my party succeeds and my country succeeds.
Events could move quickly again this week. With the path now clear, it's all but certain that John Swinney will be in the top job in the coming days. Ben Phillip, BBC News.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. President Putin has ordered the Russian military to hold nuclear weapon drills involving the Navy and troops based near Ukraine. Meanwhile, frontline Ukrainian soldiers have told the BBC the army needs to rethink how it conscripts men to fight. They say a failure to train and mobilise enough recruits means some have been fighting without a break since Russia's full-scale invasion more than 2 years ago. Our Ukraine correspondent James Waterhouse has the story.
Under the green canopy of a Ukrainian spring, an artillery unit waits for their next order. Some of these men have been fighting for months, if not years. My men know each vehicle, says their commander. It's like a woman with her own characteristics. As Russian forces inch closer, they're hunkering down and waiting for billions of dollars worth of long-delayed American ammunition to finally be delivered. This time last year, Ukraine was preparing for a counter-offensive, but this time it's different. They're preparing for what might be coming. This ammunition will help, but Ukraine is also grappling with trying to mobilise enough men to replace these ones. Kyiv is widening the call-up age, but radio operator Alexander, who works and lives in this bunker, thinks it's more than just a numbers game.
If we all go home, inexperienced soldiers might be able to hold the line, but a lot of them will die.
In the nearby city of Kramatorsk, Ilya, a frontline medic, tells me officials are not honest with recruits who are thrown into the front line indefinitely with little training. He thinks there should be a limit on the toughest deployments.
It would be more truth and effective if military recruitment office would say, guy, you will have super hard job, infantry, but for example, for half a year. Then you'll go to next level training and you'll got more specific tasks to do.
Ministers are trying to restore trust in the way the army recruits, whilst turning up the pressure for men to sign up. Inna Sovsun is a Kyiv MP whose partner is fighting, and she thinks there are enough men to swap in and out from the front line.
There are more people who are not serving than those who are serving. And the numbers is not even 1-to-1, it's a much bigger ratio.
Just how much, by the fact, with the fact your husband, your partner is serving, how much has that shaped your view?
Of course, my understanding is shaped by who I am, by the fact that I, spend countless nights worrying about where my partner is, if he is okay, and so on and so forth.
It's an anxiety shared by millions of Ukrainians. Tired soldiers are torn between needing to defend their country and wanting to go home. James Waterhouse, BBC News, the Donetsk region.
Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, has denied that ordinary Argentines are paying for his radical austerity measures. In an interview with the BBC, Mr. Milei, who campaigned with a chainsaw to symbolise his desire to slash public spending, insisted that it was false to suggest the public were bearing the brunt of steep spending cuts and the devaluation of the currency. Iona Wells started by asking him what he would say to a pensioner who told the BBC people like her were paying for his changes.
Well, actually, that is false. The largest adjustment is being paid by the political corporation. The impact on pensions is only 0.4% of GDP.
But I want to know specifically, what would you say to people right now? Would you say sorry? Would you say thank you to the people who are having to pay a lot more than they were previously as a result of the adjustment that's happening?
The mass media will deliberately lie, and people will believe those lies they get through the media. You can't make a macroeconomic evaluation based on the situation of an individual. There you are taking one of the parts rather than the whole. Actually, a particular situation may be influenced by the sort of information that the individual also has access to.
But I think, excuse me, President, and with respect, the information people have access to is the prices they're seeing in supermarkets. I mean, for example, do you know how much a litre of milk costs now in Buenos Aires?
Do you know how many goods assets exist within an economy? So you don't do economics based on the price of an individual asset.
But President, I'm sorry, I want to make sure we're speaking in terms that normal people will understand, because our audience, people on the streets here are not economists. How does somebody who has seen the price of milk double since you came to office, what would you say to them specifically, the people who are struggling and say that they feel like they are paying for the adjustment? Even if you believe it is the right one, what would be your message to them right now? How long should they wait specifically, for example, for things to feel better?
Bueno, de hecho, ya en el último mes.
In the last month, salaries started to beat inflation. They went up by 14%. Inflation was 11%. We have doubled the food welfare program, the support program for pregnant women. We have quintupled the amount of assistance for children to continue to study.
Would the message be, in simple terms, wait a bit longer? And how long, could you just give me a time frame of how long you'd like people to wait who are struggling right now?
The first thing is that in economics, miracles don't exist. What would have been the alternative? To continue to print money like the previous administration that generates inflation and ends up affecting the most vulnerable? That was not the way to go.
You have promised Argentines a roadmap to making the Falklands, known here as Malvinas, Argentine. What specifically does that roadmap look like?
We believe that has to be within the framework of peace. And as a result of a long-term negotiation process, we are not going to relinquish our sovereignty, nor are we going to seek conflict with the United Kingdom.
What makes you think that the UK would agree to that? Because they've been very clear that they do not want to negotiate this.
They might not want to negotiate today. At some later point, they might want to. Many positions have changed over time.
What kind of time frame would you offer Argentines for that?
I think it's a long time to go, and that this may be approached in the same way as in the case of China and Hong Kong. So something can be done.
So it could be decades.
Yes, of course.
Was it a provocation, in your view, for David Cameron to visit the islands in February?
No.
Why not?
Well, it wasn't. If that territory is now in the possession of the hands of the UK, he has a right to do that.
And would you still say you also admire Margaret Thatcher, who was the Prime Minister during the Falklands War?
I have heard lots of speeches by Margaret Thatcher. She was brilliant. So what's the problem?
You've positioned yourself as a very close ally to Israel. Do you still think that Israel's not committed a single excess in the conflict so far?
Of course, because there hasn't yet been a formal condemnation, as you would expect. When such things happen, when there is a formal condemnation, a serious one, not just an ideological condemnation or one by a noisy group, the conversation won't change then.
I want to ask you, Liz Truss recently said that you were her favourite Conservative leader. Do you admire her?
¿Quién?
Who?
Liz Truss, la ex primera ministra británica.
No tengo elementos como
I don't have elements to give an opinion, but what in the UK is defined as conservative, well, we libertarians have a lot of common ground with that.
You're a big fan of the Rolling Stones band. What is your favourite song by them and why?
It's very hard to pick a single Rolling Stones song that I like the most, but certainly I do believe that the one I love is Rip This Joint, which is the second song on side A of disc 1 of the album Exile on Main Street. This album has a very strong libertarian component in its history. I actually had a Rolling Stones tribute band I sang in, so I deeply admire Mick Jagger.
So many presidents have said that they will be the one to turn around Argentina's economic woes. What makes you think that you will be able to succeed where so many others have failed to do so?
After 4 months in office, despite all politicians working to prevent things from happening, we have achieved the impossible, which was to avoid what could have been the worst crisis in Argentina's history.
Before we go, an update on our top story. Hamas-affiliated media is reporting airstrikes have now been carried out in eastern Rafah, near neighbourhoods this morning received evacuation orders. And these are live pictures coming to us from Al-Mawasi, which is where some people have been told to go in that evacuation. Around 100,000 people in areas closest to the Israeli border were urged to move to what the IDF calls expanded humanitarian zones. Well, the Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant said military action against Hamas in Rafah was needed because of the group's refusal to negotiate the release of Israeli hostages. And a senior Hamas official has described the move as a dangerous escalation that will have consequences. And we're also hearing from Egyptian state-linked media that Gaza truce talks are now, quote, bogged down. Do stay with us for the very latest here on BBC News. Check out our website anytime for further updates.
Hello there. We're set to see a bit of a mix of weather types through the bank holiday Monday. We have got some warm sunshine out there for some of us, but in other areas, some pretty heavy downpours and more persistent rain around, particularly across the southeast of England and southeast Scotland as well, close to areas of low pressure that are still driving our weather at the moment. This low pressure towards the south will slowly ease away through the day, and higher pressure is going to build in as we head through the rest of the week. But back to today then, for the rest of Monday, we've got that rain sitting across the southeast of England, fairly patchy in nature, but a few heavy spells. There could be the odd thunderstorm. It's fairly cloudy here. There'll be more sunshine through parts of Devon and Cornwall, into Wales, through the Midlands as well. So sunny spells, but also a peppering of showers. If you do catch one, could be heavy and thundery. Some of the warmest spots, Hull, for instance, up to about 19 degrees, but we're typically looking at the mid to high teens. For Northern Ireland and northern and western Scotland, a fair amount of dry weather on the cards. Some sunshine, a bit more cloud working into the north here. But for central and southeast Scotland, you're going to keep the cloud. The rain will be easing out through the day. And into the evening hours, then most of us lose the showery rain. It'll slowly clear away from the southeast, but may just linger for the likes of Kent, for instance, to start your Tuesday morning. And there'll be some low clouds, some mist and some fog patches, especially for Scotland, where we've got that wet ground. Eastern England, for instance, as well, a few fog patches towards the southwest. But it should brighten up through the day tomorrow, so some sunny spells for many of us. Still some showers bubbling up through the day, but they won't be as heavy or as frequent as the showers we've got out there today. Top temperatures probably a degree or so warmer, 19, 20 degrees for some of us. But if you are stuck under the cloud across parts of Scotland, for instance, about 13 for Aberdeen. Now into Wednesday, high pressure is building in, so it's squeezing away most of the showers. A lot of dry weather for England and Wales. Can't rule out the odd showery spell, but for most places, a much drier spell of weather. A bit more cloud working in from the northwest ahead of this area of rain. But top temperatures quite widely around 19 or 20 degrees. And then high pressure stays with us towards the end of the week. It's just sitting towards the south. So we'll start to see a few weather fronts toppling around the northern end of that high pressure. At times that'll bring a little bit of showery rain to parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland too. But for most of us, things are looking much drier through the week ahead, and it'll be warming up. We could see those temperatures in the mid-20s by next weekend. Bye-bye.
The art of good conversation is to say the right thing at the right time and in the right way. You have to be original, sympathetic, encouraging, and also keep an open mind. And you really do just need to sit back and listen.
Catty Kay chats with prominent names from the worlds of business, science, and culture.
Influential with me, Catty Kay. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Welcome to breakfast.
Thanks for joining us.
Hello. You're going to have a great time.
Remember, Kev, you aren't getting any younger.
Sun up, I think, in about 10 minutes' time.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. You've been up there and looked down at us here. Right, let's go live to Westminster.
Today is going to be much colder than of late. We do want to hear your stories.
Oh, he does smell good, actually. Arnold Schwarzenegger, thank you very much.
Start your day the BBC Breakfast way on BBC One and iPlayer.
I'll make sure the mics are recording us. Margaret Atwood, welcome to This Cultural Life.
Some of the world's leading artistic figures revealed to me their influences.
You try and meet more or less everyone who wants to meet you because you never know where things go.
And the experiences that have inspired their own work.
People around me never said you can't do this.
I was totally in love with Monk.
Now I'm blushing. Find out what fires the creative imagination with John Wilson. This Cultural Life. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
High-stakes diplomacy. China's president has arrived in France, with trade at the top of his agenda. And the shipping crisis in the Red Sea is worsening. Maersk warns its capacity will be cut by 20% in the months ahead. Hello, this is World Business Report. I'm Ben Thompson, and we're going to start this programme in France. That is where the Chinese President Xi Jinping has kicked off his first trip to Europe in 5 years. There, he's been meeting with the President Emmanuel Macron at the Élysée Palace, along with the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Well, the visit comes as some countries in Europe are taking action over what they perceive to be anti-competitive practices by China. France backed a European Commission anti-subsidy inquiry into Chinese electric vehicle imports. In retaliation, China launched an anti-dumping investigation into brandy, which was seen as directly targeting France.
On economic issues, I think the message by France is on reciprocity and addressing asymmetries. France has a trade deficit of about 50 billion euros with China. I don't think that this time you should expect any French concessions on what we call now the economic security agenda, the investigation going on Chinese electric vehicles, the problems of lack of reciprocity in terms of access to public markets. I don't think that France should be expected to move on that. On the contrary, on the anti-dumping investigation on brandy, I think that the line of argument on the French side will be that it does not make sense to dump a luxury product on which one has a quasi-monopoly. But I think what France seeks with the trip is really balance, inviting von der Leyen and Scholz, even if Chancellor Scholz didn't take the invitation, tells you that France prioritizes EU unity on these issues, and that this visit will not be primarily about French business interests in China, such as Airbus, nuclear energy, luxury products, or agricultural products.
We will keep you up to date with any new developing lines coming from that meeting. But elsewhere today, the Danish shipping giant Maersk says that disruption to container traffic in the Red Sea is getting worse because drone and missile attacks on ships by Yemen's Houthi rebels are reaching further offshore. Maersk said it estimated the industry had lost between 15 and 20% of its capacity on key routes, the Far East to Mediterranean and Northern European routes. It said it had added extra container capacity and was sailing faster on a route around southern Africa to offset some of the disruption, but those routes mean it is using 40% more fuel. Let's talk to Lars Jensen, who's CEO at the shipping consultants at Vespucci Maritime. Lars, good to have you with us. And talk to us first of all about what is happening. Those drone attacks are able to get further out to sea. So is it the case it's disrupting more ships, or it's just reaching the ships that we're trying to avoid those attacks?
No, it's reaching further out. Within the last week and a half, we have now seen attacks ranging into the Indian Ocean itself. The problematic issue there is prior to these attacks, it was basically free passage from Africa up to some of the key transshipment hubs you have on the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. Those routes are now also compromised, forcing the ships to take a detour closer to the Indian coast. And that, of course, soaks up more capacity.
Yes, soaking up more capacity and adding extra costs, one would assume. It's difficult to put real numbers on it at the moment because we don't know how long this will go on for. But what is your assessment of how disruptive this is?
This is a very, very significant disruption. We are basically at a break even that we have enough ships in the world to deal with these disruptions. We are not at pandemic level territory, but we cannot handle more disruptions on top of what we have already.
And it certainly seems that there is no end in sight to these attacks. We know that the Houthi leader making a speech last week vowing that the attacks would get worse. What can shipping companies do right now? Do they have any options?
There are not really any options apart from continuing to go around Africa, taking longer detours in the Indian Ocean. We have had military presence now for 4.5 months trying to protect some of shipping in the region. And we can just see that this has done nothing to change the frequency and success rate of the attacks on merchant ships.
Lars, always good to talk to you. Thank you. There's a lot to fit in this programme, but thanks. Lars Jensen there, Chief Executive at the Shipping Consultants, Vespucci Maritime. Now, it is a public holiday in the UK today. It means many people may be heading out to the pub. But last year alone, more than 500 pubs closed. That's according to the British Beer and Pub Association. Today, though, the brewing giant Heineken says it's hoping to buck that trend. It's investing £39 million in hundreds of its UK pubs. It will even reopen 62 that previously had been closed. Let's speak to our business reporter, Vishala Sripatma, who's in the newsroom. And Vish, give us a sense of what Heineken have said, because it really does reverse the trend, doesn't it? Of all those closures we've seen in recent years, they seem to think there is life yet in the pub model.
That's right, Ben, and they've clearly seen an opportunity here. Now, suburban areas across the UK, because of the pandemic, are seeing more people work from home. Those suburban towns don't necessarily have the restaurants, the pubs and cafes that city centres offer people. And so Heineken have seen that this could be a captive market for them, that they could have a sense of demand for that pub culture, and hence why they're investing. So what they're doing is they're reopening 62 UK pubs that are closed in recent years, and they'll put around £40 million in investment in those pubs. They're not the only ones. Green King, another big pub chain group in the UK, are going to do the same. They're reinvesting in breweries, as are another brand as well called the Star Pub Group as well. So quite a few of people in the industry, a few companies in the industry are doing the same, and they're hoping that the problems that they faced during the cost of living crisis, where people didn't have as much disposable income, and that impacted the likes of pubs and restaurants because they weren't spending in them as much, and also during the pandemic they were closed. They're hoping that they're going to recuperate some of those losses and capture some of that spending power back in the great British public kind of love for beer, effectively.
Yeah, cheers to that. Vish, thank you. We'll talk later. Thank you very much. Now let's head to Asia, where people are bracing themselves for yet another hot summer. Last year was the hottest year ever. 2024 looks no better. With the details, here's Suranjan Thawari with the details from Singapore.
Countries across Asia are on guard for more severe heat and rain, with experts warning that extreme weather could lead to a cocktail of health hazards for workers in this region. We now know that last year was the hottest on record, and April of this year has been similarly hot and dry for many countries in South and Southeast Asia, with temperatures topping 40 degrees Celsius in many cities. Schools in Bangladesh have now reopened after being closed. Thailand's capital, Bangkok, has been abnormally dry with barely any rainfall in April. And in China, we've seen days of heavy rainfall battering parts of the southern province of Guangdong. That's caused multiple deaths and forced more than 110,000 people from their homes. So why is this happening? Well, it's partly being fueled by the El Niño weather pattern. Scientists have said climate change is causing more frequent, severe and lengthy heat waves during summer months as well. Many people have died across the region, and experts have warned that heat could exacerbate inequalities, widening a learning gap between developing and developed nations as a result of those school closures. Intense heat waves have also caused water shortages and frequent power cuts, hitting the key apparel sector in Bangladesh, for example, which accounts for more than 80% of exports and supplies retailers like H&M, Walmart and Gap.
Suranjana Thawari there with the details from Singapore. Now, a new study has found that schemes like carbon offsetting and deforestation-free certification schemes have largely failed to protect trees or alleviate poverty. The International Union of Forest Research Organisations found that such initiatives only made limited progress. The scientists behind the report are urging a radical rethink. Well, let's speak to one of the lead authors. That's Dr. Constance McDermott, who's from the Environmental Change Institute at the University of Oxford. Thank you for being with us on the programme, and give me your sense of why you think these schemes have failed.
Well, thank you very much. So it is important to realize that global and urban markets for commodities like palm oil and soy or cocoa and coffee are major drivers of deforestation. But at the same time, the reason that we see them driving deforestation is because of major issues and inequalities with governments in the countries that are affected in terms of their capacity to manage land sustainably, in terms of their access to alternative options, alternative sources of economy. So So the problem is really that we're not addressing these sort of major underlying problems around governance in the countries that are affected by these global markets. So simply coming up with alternative markets that often don't deliver anywhere near the same kinds of resources is not enough to sort of address the underlying problems with governance in these countries.
And I look at your report and you make it really clear as well that we view forests as a commodity, somewhere, particularly when it comes to being a carbon sink, somewhere that will remove carbon from the atmosphere, rather than the wider impact of what that forest does in terms of ecology and biodiversity. We see it as just somewhere that will suck up the carbon that we produce, and it becomes a commodity, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And it's so important in thinking about addressing deforestation to realize that forests are much more than carbon, but also that governance is much more than simply finance. I mean, you have to, for finance to be effective, it needs to be channeled in a way and governed effectively, right? So just thinking that the problem is, we need to incentivize by offering payments for carbon, for example, is just not going to address those underlying problems and drivers.
What is the solution? How do we change our perspective on how we view our forests?
Well, I think the good news is that there are a lot of approaches that work. Countries, for example, such as Brazil, when the national government made an effort to stop deforestation, it was actually effective for a number of years because the strategies that were adopted were created by countries that knew their local context. Same can be said for a lot of local and grassroots initiatives that can be very effective at keeping forest cover, and of course, indigenous communities as well. So I think if we spend more time listening and seeing what is working, and then working with the key actors to co-design approaches in each country that are appropriate to the context, I think this will really help enhance the effectiveness of international efforts.
Really briefly for us, Dr. Constant, how optimistic are you that there is a better solution and we can enforce it?
Well, I think I am optimistic that there are better solutions. But I think we need to think outside of just enforcing, or that any one country or the world is going to enforce it, right?
So good to talk to you. Thank you. Time is tight, but great to get your insight. Thank you for joining us. That's Dr. Constant McDermott. You're up to date. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
I'm not sure I've actually said this before. I came up there and I cried. Wow.
A symbol of friendship to some, panda diplomacy to others.
That world has eaten up and spit out a lot of young and attractive guys.
There's always more to the story with our podcasts. Listen on BBC Sounds.
Hello from the BBC Sports Centre. We'll start with Formula One, where after more than 100 races and 15 podiums, Lando Norris is finally standing on the top step after claiming victory. At the Miami Grand Prix, he was quick to praise his McLaren team after a race that owed a little to luck, but also saw a large helping of out-and-out pace to beat Max Verstappen. Lydia Campbell reports.
The Miami Grand Prix has only ever seen one winner, so when Max Verstappen started from pole on Sunday, most fans were expecting another routine victory for the three-time world champion. But this race turned on its head 29 laps in when Kevin Magnussen and Logan Sargent came together, causing a safety car, allowing the McLaren of Lando Norris to capitalise. And thanks to a clean restart, Norris now only had one focus: keep Verstappen at bay. No simple task up against the man who has dominated Formula One over the past few years. But this was Norris's day, driving with a combination of pace and panache to cross the line for his first race win.
I'm just proud, really. I mean, a lot of people, I guess, doubted me along the way. I've made a lot of mistakes over my last 5 years, my short career, but today we put it all together. So this is all for the team. I stuck with McLaren because I could believe in them, and I did believe in them, and today proved exactly that.
It has taken Norris 110 races to finally finish first. But if Miami was anything to go by, it's unlikely that he'll wait that long for his next one. Lydia Campbell, BBC News.
Yeah, it's only the third time in 24 races that a man not called Verstappen has won. So is Norris's form, combined with an improved McLaren, a threat to Red Bull's recent dominance?
Time will tell. The upgrades that McLaren have brought, if you go all the way back to the beginning of last season, they were dead last. They'd missed all their targets through winter, so they had to wait until they bought that first upgrade package to even be remotely in with a chance of scoring points. Now, they keep upgrading, and these upgrade packages seem to give them at least 0.3 each lap, which is amazing. So if they can keep that going, there'll be another upgrade to go this season, and outfox Red Bull at their own game. They can definitely bring that challenge to the team.
Lots of silverware being decided in European football over the weekend, with Real Madrid winning La Liga and Sporting being crowned Portuguese champions without kicking a ball. Defending champions and rivals Benfica had to beat Famalicão, but were beaten 2-0, and Sporting were ready to celebrate with an open-top bus parade through downtown Lisbon. It's their first title in 3 years. The final of the World Snooker Championship resumes in just over an hour, with Kyron Wilson looking to force home his advantage and take a maiden title in Sheffield. He leads qualifier Jack Jones by 11 frames to 6, having raced into a 6-frame lead in Sunday's afternoon session. The Welshman Jones managed to reduce the deficit, but Wilson clinched a crucial 17th frame on the black, first to 18 wins. Another maiden victory to tell you about, this time in Texas, where the Canadian Taylor Pendrith said it was unreal after claiming his first win on the PGA Tour. He led by a shot on the 16th, but trailed by one going down the last at the CJ Cup, Byron Nelson. But when Ben Kohlers bogeyed the 18th, it left Pendrith with a 3-foot birdie putt to become the 6th first-time winner on the PGA Tour this year.
Then when he missed his par putt and I realized I had a putt for the win, it was, yeah, kind of all of a blur, really, but I've never had a putt to win a PGA Tour event, so my caddy said this is the straightest putt we've had all year, and just knock it in, and it managed to slip in the left edge, so I'm pretty happy.
The Cleveland Cavaliers overcame the largest Game 7 deficit in the playoff era to advance to the NBA Conference semi-finals at the expense of Orlando Magic, trailing by 18. Donovan Mitchell's 39 points propelled the Cavs into the second round, where they'll meet Boston. Mitchell added to the 50-point haul he returned when the Cavs lost in Game 6 too.
I mean, this was great because we were able to learn a lot of things about ourselves. You know, I'm never going to shy away from that, but, you know, we can be better. You know what I mean? And I hate to be that guy, but, like, you know, this was great. This was phenomenal as a great win, great series, great test for us mentally, physically, but, you know, we can and we will have to be better to beat Boston. No disrespect to Orlando because they are a phenomenal team. They got a lot of great guys, but, you know, I feel like this was just big for us as a group, but we don't really have time to celebrate, to be honest with you. So.
And we'll finish with motorsport, where there have been 2,762 NASCAR races down the years. None saw a close as finish as the one we witnessed at Kansas Speedway on Sunday. Carl Larson in the blue car came around the outside of Chris Buescher, exchanged some paint along the way and crossed the line right about here to officially win by 1,000th of a second. This after 267 laps of racing in the Cup Series. It gives Larson his second win of the season. Wild was how he described it. Want to know how tight it was? About that tight. And you've got stage 3 of the Giro d'Italia getting underway too. See more of that on the website. But from me and the team, thanks for watching.
The latest figures for England and Wales show that 247 people lost their lives as a result of knife crime between July 2022 and June 2023. Mikey Roynan was just 16 when he was stabbed to death in Somerset last year. Our correspondent Dan Johnson has been following the case and sent this report.
10th of June last summer, and teenagers are heading to a birthday party in Bath that's been advertised on Snapchat. This is Mikey travelling from the edge of Bristol with some friends. He was about to come across this group of teenagers from Wiltshire heading to the same party.
This is the ambulance service. Is the patient breathing? They've just been stabbed at a house party, please.
There was a violent confrontation and Mikey was stabbed in the neck. It was Shane Cunningham who stabbed Mikey, he claimed, in self-defence, but he was convicted of murder. Cartel Bushnell and Leo Knight were given 9 years for manslaughter for encouraging and supporting the attack.
Was it you that stabbed him in the neck?
Shane Cunningham didn't give any answers in custody or in court, so we may never know what sparked the confrontation. The judge passed a life sentence and said he must serve at least 16 years.
Bristol and its surrounding areas are in the middle of a plague of knife crime. The plague has continued since this trial finished. The lives of young boys who carry knives continue to be taken at the hands of other boys who carry knives.
This family's campaigning now to highlight knife crime and how many children are armed and prepared to take lives. Dan Johnson, BBC News at Bristol Crown Court.
Rail passengers are facing widespread disruption this week as train workers begin a fresh round of industrial action. Members of the ASLEF union start a 6-day overtime ban today, which is expected to cause widespread disruption. A series of one-day strikes is also being staged at 16 rail companies throughout the week as part of a long-running dispute over pay. Our business correspondent Mark Ashdown explains.
It's going to be another frustrating week for rail passengers. Drivers say working overtime is crucial to keep the network moving, so a 6-day ban is likely to cause widespread delays and cancellations. On top of that, they're staging a series of one-day walkouts from tomorrow. Services on lines mainly in and around London and the South East will be the first to be affected. Then on Wednesday, 6 lines which serve the Midlands, West of England and Wales will be impacted. And on Thursday, drivers in the north of England and on some services running into Scotland will walk out. This dispute over pay has been rumbling on since July 2022, and the last formal talks were held more than a year ago. The Rail Delivery Group, which represents the 16 train companies involved, tabled an offer of a 4% pay rise for 2 consecutive years, but said ways of working also needed to change. ASLEF dismissed the offer as risible. Last week, the RDG reached out to the union to try to find what it called common ground in order to get back round the negotiating table. ASLEF leaders said they were open to the possibility of fresh talks. So there is a glimmer of hope for a resolution, but another week of travel misery looms for passengers. Mark Ashdown, BBC News.
Just before we go, let's show you some live pictures from an event happening at the top of the hour. Well, royal gun salutes are due to be fired in London and other locations across the UK to mark the first anniversary of King Charles's coronation. And these pictures are from Green Park, where that event is about to take place, and we'll bring you those live events as they happen. A 41 gun salute in Green Park, and they're getting ready for that now. First, though, let's get a quick look at the weather, how that's going to be. Sarah Keith Lucas is here.
Hello there. We're set to see a bit of a mix of weather types through the bank holiday Monday. We have got some warm sunshine out there for some of us, but in other areas, some pretty heavy downpours and more persistent rain around, particularly across the southeast of England and southeast Scotland as well, close to areas of low pressure that are still driving our weather at the moment. This low pressure towards the south will slowly ease away through the day, and higher pressure is going to build in as we head through the rest of the week. But back to today then, for the rest of Monday, we've got that rain sitting across the southeast of England, fairly patchy in nature, but a few heavy spells. There could be the odd thunderstorm. It's fairly cloudy here. There'll be more sunshine through parts of Devon and Cornwall, into Wales, through the Midlands as well. So sunny spells, but also a peppering of showers. If you do catch one, could be heavy and thundery. Some of the warmest spots, Hull, for instance, up to about 19 degrees, but we're typically looking at the mid to high teens. For Northern Ireland and northern and western Scotland, a fair amount of dry weather on the cards. Some sunshine, a bit more cloud working into the north here. But for central and southeast Scotland, you're going to keep the cloud. The rain will be easing out through the day. And into the evening hours, then most of us lose the showery rain. It'll slowly clear away from the southeast, but may just linger for the likes of Kent, for instance, to start your Tuesday morning. And there'll be some low clouds, some mist and some fog patches, especially for Scotland, where we've got that wet ground. Eastern England, for instance, as well, a few fog patches towards the southwest. But it should brighten up through the day tomorrow, so some sunny spells for many of us. Still some showers bubbling up through the day, but they won't be as heavy or as frequent as the showers we've got out there today. Top temperatures probably a degree or so warmer, 19, 20 degrees for some of us. But if you are stuck under the cloud across parts of Scotland, for instance, about 13 for Aberdeen. Now into Wednesday, high pressure is building in, so it's squeezing away most of the showers. A lot of dry weather for England and Wales. Can't rule out the odd showery spell, but for most places, a much drier spell of weather. A bit more cloud working in from the northwest ahead of this area of rain. But top temperatures quite widely around 19 or 20 degrees. And then high pressure stays with us towards the end of the week. It's just sitting towards the south. So we'll start to see a few weather fronts toppling around the northern end of that high pressure. At times that'll bring a little bit of showery rain to parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland too. But for most of us, things are looking much drier through the week ahead, and it'll be warming up. We could see those temperatures in the mid to 20s by next weekend. Bye-bye.
I used to work the whole day when I was pregnant. I wouldn't take much rest. I remember being thirsty all the time and out of breath.
Acabamos de llegar al lugar donde va a comenzar la búsqueda del migrante desaparecido.
So from where we're at right now, we can see from left to right and right to left, a heavily wooded area denotes the border between North and South Korea. There are no fences, there are no barriers, and there are no walls that separate North and South.
زنایی که فقط باید سکوت کنن، هیچ کس نباید صدایشان رو بشنوه، صدای گپشان رو بشنوه. ما تصمیم گرفتیم که در اونجا باید صدامون رو به شکل آهنگ بیرون کنیم.
Just because we've got a disability doesn't mean that we are children. We are adults and with hopes and dreams. Without sports, none of us would be here.
Inspiring short films from the BBC. Watch now on iPlayer.
I want to talk to you about the politics of this. Did she not think she was going to get that question?
It's important to remember that this is a negotiation.
It's a good photo of.
I have an opportunity to create chaos.
There is always an email. We are so insignificant in this cosmos. Do you want some facts on baguettes? I'm just feeding you the stories. Maybe this is the context.
The Context, weeknights from 8 p.m. on BBC News and iPlayer.
Hello, welcome to BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. Thank you very much for joining us here. We've come on air just a minute or so ahead of the top of the hour because I want to show you these live pictures from London. We are expecting events across the UK to mark the anniversary, the first anniversary of the King and Queen's coronation. And here in central London, in Green Park, we are about to witness a gun salute, a 41 gun salute by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. Let's watch. And we are watching the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, a 41-gun royal salute marking the first anniversary of the King's coronation. And we'll leave events there in Green Park in central London, marking the first anniversary of the King's coronation. Right, we're going to head straight to Scotland now, and the SNP leadership race. In the last 3 minutes, nominations to be the next leader of the Scottish National Party have closed. Now, we do know John Swinney, on your screens there, has put his name into the ring. He's the front runner. The big question is whether there are any last-minute opponents. Also, you may remember Humza Yousaf resigned as leader and First Minister of the SNP up in Scotland just last week. So let's go to our reporter, Ben Phillip, who's standing by for us. Ben, so literally just in the last couple of minutes, nominations, that deadline for nominations has closed. What does that mean?
That's right, Lewis. As you say, just in the last few minutes there, nominations, the deadline for SNP leadership nominations has closed in the last few minutes at noon. We are still awaiting an official result from the SNP. But as you say, it's been widely expected that John Swinney would be unopposed in the leadership race to replace Humza Yousaf, who resigned last Monday. We haven't heard about anyone else publicly in the running to stand for SNP